Alright, how's it going everyone? So today, we've got another art school video for you guys, and this one will be about observation. Basically, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to go from a drawing like this to something like this. And to help me out, this time I've got Kamurata with me.
Hey, we're back!
And that guy.
Yay!
Alright, and let's get started. So, before we really get into the actual techniques, I've got a pose here that I would like you guys to draw first, and then we'll draw this pose again at the end of this video to see if you guys have actually learned something. Alright, so here's what we've got for the drawings. This one was made by Kamurata, and then this one was made by that guy. We'll take a look at these again at the end of the video. So, first of all, observation has to do with the way you perceive things, and contrary to popular belief, unless you've trained your observation skills, you're not as good at seeing things as you think you are. Now, as an example, I'd like you guys to draw a tree. Very common object, see them all the time, so of course, everyone knows what they look like. Now,
Can I use color blocking?
no, just draw a simple tree with lines and then add some flat colors to it.
Like okay, not the number tree.
No.
What?
You said draw a tree. Yeah, I see a tree a lot of time.
So here are the trees drawn by Kamurata and that guy, and there's one thing I'd like to point out. Trees are not brown. It's a common mistake people make, if you will, but trees
How dare you?
trees are actually more of a green, gray, yellowish color, as you can see here. There's also some blue and black in the shadows, and maybe a very desaturated brown, but they're not the color that people think they are. Now, trees are the example I used, but this actually happens to every single object that exists. You see an object, your brain filters out the unnecessary information, and then simplifies it, and that simplification is how you remember it. But for the purposes of art, we're gonna have to learn how to ignore our brain's assumptions and simplifications and instead draw things the way we actually see them. Now, when it comes to drawing things the way we see them, there are a couple techniques we can use. 3 of them, to be exact. Now, before we get into those techniques, we have to talk a little bit about perspective. The techniques I'm going to talk about don't rely on perspective, so you don't really have to understand how it works yet, and we'll do a perspective video in the future. But the reason why I want to bring up perspective, though, is because it changes how things appear in real life versus how you think they appear. Now, perspective has to do with the way objects exist in 3D space. And 3D space, of course, refers to the fact that every single object has a height, a width, and a depth. This box, for example, we've got the height here, then the width, and then the depth over here. The height, width, and depth can also be represented with the X, Y, and Z system. The rules of perspective state that as an object moves away from the viewer, all of this object's parallel lines converge to a point on the horizon. If we say this is the point, and then we have an object here, let's say it's a river of
Blood.
yeah,
It
a
is
river
red.
of blood. This object's lines are now converging to that point. If we have a box and it's split up into the X, Y, and Z system, all of the parallel lines on the Z axis are going to be converging to the same point, all of the parallel lines on the X axis are going to converge to the same point, and all the parallel lines on the Y axis are going to be converging to the same point as well. Now, in our head, the idea of a box is that the corners of the box are all perfectly 90 degrees. All of these corners, 90 degrees. But if we look at this box, the one that's drawn in perspective, this corner, for example, is not 90 degrees. It's more like 45, I guess, or a little less than that. And this is how real life differs from our assumed perception of reality. Things that we assume to be right angles are still right angles in real life, but because of how perspective works, visually, these corners don't appear to be 90 degrees. Now, the first technique I want to teach you guys about is angles. Like I said in the perspective section, even if something has a true 90-degree angle in reality, in perspective, that angle will most likely appear to be less than 90 degrees. So, to be able to accurately observe things, we can't just make assumptions about the angles, and instead, we have to actually measure them. So let's take a look at some of these angles that I'm talking about. First we have this pole right here. Then these following 3 poles, they're all in the same line to that original one. They're parallel to it, right? But in the image, this line is going this way instead of a regular horizontal line as we would assume it to be. Same thing with this building here at the top. This is going down, whereas we assume that it's perfectly horizontal. Got the same thing here with this fence. It's going slightly up. Well, actually, this one is horizontal because horizon line. But that doesn't matter. It's going up even though in real life we know it's going horizontal like that. You don't have to know the perspective reasons for why these lines are angled this way, just that they can be angled this way. So going back to the post that I had that guy in Kamurata draw at the start of the video, let's identify some of the angles on this figure. So we know that in real life, legs are going straight down, but in this image, this leg is going this way. Same thing with this one, it's going at an angle like that. We know the arms are usually straight down the body. In this case, they're going this way. Same thing with the hips and shoulders. We know in real life, these are horizontal, parallel to the ground, but in this image, the hips are going this way, the shoulders are kind of hard to see, but they're also going in a direction like that. So if you want to draw your figure accurately, the first thing you need to do is pay attention to these angles and make sure that you draw these angles exactly the same way as you're seeing them instead of what your brain assumes them to be. Now the second technique will be about measurements, essentially taking 2 objects in the image and then comparing them to each other. You know how if you're trying to draw characters, you usually measure the height of the character in head lengths. Like let's say we have a body that's 7 heads tall. It's similar to this, where you take the height of an object, like let's say this pole for example, and then we compare it to other parts of the image. In this case, the height of this pole seems to line up exactly with the height of this building right here. Or for example, let's say we have this fence. If we measure the height of the bottom part of the fence and we compare it to the top part, it's basically the same height as well. So if you're going to try to replicate this image, you have to make sure that this pole here at the front is the same height as this house here in the back, or that the bottom and top part of the fence are the same height as each other. Now again, going back to the pose, like I said before, characters are usually measured in head proportions, so you take the height of the character's head and then compare it to the rest of the body. But you can also do that with other body parts. It just depends on what's most convenient for you. Like for example, you could take the hips and then compare them to the knees. You can take the vertical length of the bottom of the foot to the knee and then compare that to the torso, for example. And you just have to get creative with that. It's also pretty difficult to do if you're not used to it and time consuming, but that's why we practice, so we can actually pull this off when we're trying to do a drawing. And the third technique will be about comparing reference points. So a reference point or a landmark is basically a clearly identifiable point in the image. So for example, let's take this point right here. You can see how the building is going up, and then from here it's going back. There's a clear transition creating a point. You can see it right here as well, that point. This one counts as well, because building's going down and then going that way. But technically you can choose whatever you want as a reference point. It just, again, comes down to what's most convenient for you. But the way to use these reference points is you place them somewhere, like let's say here. Then from here, we draw or imagine a horizontal line going to the right. Now we can compare other parts of the image to this horizontal line. This pole, for example, extends to above our horizontal line. This part of the building is below it. If we draw a vertical line down, we can see that this part of the building sticks out to the right. And again, this technique applies to our figure as well. So let's take the knee, for example. That's a pretty good landmark. From here, draw a line straight up. We'll draw one that's horizontal. And then you can see that the elbow basically lines up with the knee. We can see that it lines up almost halfway on the head. So half of the head is supposed to be on this side, the other half's on that side. Horizontally, the other knee sticks out below this line. Then we could also do this with the chin, for example. Makes a pretty good landmark as well. If we have a horizontal line, we can see that the arm is below this. We can see that part of the shoulder is above this. We can do it with the ear as well. And that's essentially how you perfectly copy a figure. And technically, there's another technique you can use, and that one has to do with negative space. So if we take a look at this image again, you can see right here, if we draw a horizontal line, there's now a shape, kind of looks like a trapezoid. So if we're going to draw this part of the image, we have to make sure that this trapezoid shape exists there as well if we want to perfectly copy this part of the image. But the reason why I don't recommend you use this is because I can't really think of a skill that's improving when you're using negative space. It'll help you make more accurate images, but for the purposes of improving, it kind of seems like a waste of time. Okay, so those are our techniques. We have the angles, we have measurements, and we have reference points. Now, I want you guys to use these techniques, or at least try to use them, and do this drawing again, and see if you can do it any better than you did previously. Alright, so we've got the new versions. Here are the old ones, and then here are the revised versions. So with Kamurata and both that guy, we can see that they look slightly better. That's it for the observation video. I expect you guys, you know, that guy and Kamurata, as well as the viewers watching, I expect you guys to practice this just like you did with the line work exercises. And next time, I haven't really decided what's going to be the video topic. Maybe it's going to be about forms, or maybe it's going to be about analyzing your own artwork. We'll have to see about that. But anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I guess we'll see you all in the next video.